SpaceX's Starship has been really hyped up in the news recently, and everyone has been dreaming about using it to get to Mars. However, that's not going to happen anytime soon. I'm not saying that Starship is bad, it just has different purposes. It could bring cargo to Mars, to the Moon, or to low Earth orbit, but bringing people to Mars is a whole nother ballgame. And spoiler alert, it probably isn't going to happen in Elon Musk's lifetime. One technology that we would need to get to Mars is artificial gravity. Humans are designed to live on Earth, where we are constantly being pulled down by gravity. Most of our bodily functions need gravity to work, so we would either need artificial gravity, or some way to completely redesign the human body in order to get to Mars. Bones will deteriorate in low G because your body stops adding material to them when they aren't being used. Muscles will also weaken over time for the same reasons. The cardiovascular system that moves blood around the body works less effectively because your body doesn't know how to pump blood into your legs. It just relies on gravity to bring blood to the lower regions of your body. Because of being exposed to fewer viruses and bacteria in space, your immune system will also deteriorate after long periods in a vacuum. Finally, humans have spent all their lives learning how to move on Earth. In low-G environments, moving is incredibly different, and humans will need to relearn how all of that works in space. No amount of training on Earth can prepare someone for life in a vacuum. Now let's just pretend that these intrepid astronauts somehow made it to Mars. After 43 weeks in space, their bodies will have been decimated by a continuous, weightless environment. Astronauts who spend 6 months on the ISS aren't even capable of walking after returning to Earth, let alone donning a spacesuit and going on EVA. And this doesn't even account for the fact that either the braking burn to get into Mars orbit, or the landing burn to land on Mars could provide upwards of 6 Gs of deceleration. Yes, you heard me right, that's 6 times the gravity that we experience here on Earth. And after months in a weightless environment, this could kill an astronaut. All of this can be fixed using artificial gravity, but now you're probably wondering, person I know nothing about, how do we create gravity? And if you do know, then why are you watching this video? Artificial gravity is always created using inertia. Inertia is the idea that objects will want to resist a change in motion. Basically, what this means is that if a rocket starts going in one direction, the objects inside of it will stay in the location that they were already in, but the rocket will be moving forward. This creates the illusion that the objects inside the rocket are being moved downwards. This phenomena is usually called G-force. As I said earlier, there are 2 different ways to create this illusion of gravity. The first way is obvious. You just fire engines in a direction. This accelerates the spacecraft and produces the phenomena described above. The other way involves a force called centripetal force, and it is the force of spinning things. An object can't travel along a circular path without an external force that constantly acts on this object. This is because a circle is not a direction. If someone asks you to point along a curved path, you can't do it. That's because you can only point in directions. Spinning rings can also create gravity using a combination of inertia and centripetal force. As the rings spin, it is constantly changing its direction because a circle is not a direction. This change in direction combined with inertia will simulate gravity. One of the main problems with this kind of artificial gravity is called the Coriolis effect. Anyone who has ever watched a sci-fi movie or read a sci-fi book will have heard of this. And it is actually a pretty simple concept. Let's go back to the example of the spinning ring. Let us pretend that the ring can complete 4 rotations in a minute. Then what speed is it traveling at? Well, different parts of the ring will actually be traveling at different speeds. This is because the center of the ring has a very small circumference, so it has to travel a smaller distance, while the outside of the ring has a much larger circumference, so it needs to travel a longer distance in the same amount of time. As we all know, this means that it goes faster. This effect can make it incredibly confusing for the astronauts living in rotating habitats. Let's say an astronaut named Tim needs to throw rations to an astronaut named Sally. Tim is closer to the outside of the ring, and Sally is closer to the center of the ring. This means that Tim is moving faster than Sally, so if Tim throws the rations in a straight line, they will actually land to the left of Sally, assuming that the ring is rotating clockwise. The Coriolis effect can also be observed here on Earth. For example, at the North Pole, the air is very cold. This means that air molecules at the North Pole move slower than other air molecules because temperature is a measure of the average movement of molecules. This means that air at the North Pole will be denser than air in warmer regions. Because of this, the air at the North Pole will move towards the warmer air at the equator because all things will try to move towards a state of equilibrium. As these air masses move towards each other, they will begin spinning around each other because the Coriolis effect will make these air masses shift as they travel. Eventually, once enough air is added to this spinning air mass, it will create a hurricane or another kind of cyclone. But Earth is not the best place to observe the Coriolis effect. Jupiter actually rotates much faster than Earth, so the Coriolis effect is much stronger on Jupiter. This creates much faster and longer-lasting cyclones, like the infamous Great Red Spot. Another problem with rotation gravity is just regular old motion sickness. If the ring spins too quickly, then the astronauts could get motion sick and vomit. What this all means is that artificial gravity would be required to go to Mars. And there have been ideas for how you could do this. The most common idea is to have a spacecraft with 2 cables coming out of it. These cables would range in length from 50 to 200 meters, depending on the design. At the ends of these cables, habitation modules would be placed. During flight, the central spacecraft would be spun, which would create artificial gravity in the habitation module. This plane is much more mass efficient than having an entire ring, and it is also very volume efficient because the cables aren't rigid and could be rolled up in a spool of some kind. The downside is that when performing maneuvers, the artificial gravity would have to be turned off because the cables aren't rigid and would probably bend and flex during the maneuver. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem because maneuvers are usually planned in advance. However, if there was an emergency where the craft had to make a split-second maneuver in order to avoid debris, then this would be a problem. The other common plan is intermittent artificial gravity. This is when the crew would spin in smaller centrifuges with much higher Gs. This would be very mass efficient because smaller centrifuge, but the crew wouldn't be able to work while in the centrifuges because the Coriolis effect would be much stronger. And we don't even know if this does enough. We haven't tested this idea as much as we would like. People have also tested intermittent artificial gravity that was human-powered. The subject would pedal while in the centrifuge and the wheels would spin, making artificial gravity. This is a cool idea because it saves electricity and it lets the human exercise, which is always good. Of course, a lack of gravity isn't the only thing preventing us from going to Mars. We would also have to survive the radiation in deep space, have habitats on Mars, survive Mars's toxic soil, survive the radiation on Mars, survive the return trip, and not be killed by our weakened immune systems after years in an environment with little to no diseases. Have a nice day, and don't go to Mars.